Paris was electric. Not the usual, romantic kind of electric, but the kind that buzzes through your veins when the world's most powerful cameras, the sharpest fashion editors, and the most notorious celebrities converge on one runway. The Balenciaga Women's Wear Spring-Summer 2026 show promised glamour, innovation, and style so cutting-edge it could make even the most seasoned designer blush. But no one expected what would unfold that day. Something that would make headlines, dominate social media, and leave both the fashion world and the royal family whispering for weeks. It all started with her arrival. The Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, stepped out of her sleek limousine in an all-white ensemble that screamed sophistication, yet carried an air of audacious ambition. A flowing cape draped dramatically over her shoulders, falling in a long train behind her, brushing the Paris cobblestones like a whisper of authority. Her white button-down shirt shimmered softly under the flashes of 100 cameras, paired with wide-legged trousers that moved like liquid silk with each step. Black satin Balenciaga knife heels added an edge to the otherwise ethereal look, and a small black purse completed the ensemble, a symbol of restraint amidst chaos. Her hair was slicked back into a tight bun, a nod to precision, control, and composure. At first glance, it was the outfit of a woman who had arrived to dominate, not just attend. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But clothing alone does not command the room. Meghan knew this. She had made a career out of understanding optics, presence, and the careful orchestration of moments. Every tilt of the head, every subtle smile, every controlled laugh was a note in a symphony designed to capture attention. And she did. The moment she stepped onto the red carpet, the camera shutters began to explode like 1,000 tiny fireworks. Fans craned their necks, whispering her name, some in awe, some in judgment. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, trying to capture a glimpse of her expression, any subtle change in demeanor that could reveal the story behind the Duchess. For Meghan, every second on that carpet mattered. Every photograph, every online article, every whispered commentary could be weaponized or celebrated. And she wasn't just attending a fashion show. She was making a statement. But this time, her target was not the audience, the paparazzi, or even the designers. Her gaze was fixed on one woman, Anna Wintour. Anna Wintour, the editor-in-chief of Vogue, the queen of fashion, the woman whose approval could elevate a designer to legendary status or crush careers with a single glance. Anna was more than a fashion icon. She was a cultural barometer. To be acknowledged by her, or even tolerated in her presence, meant survival in the ruthless ecosystem of haute couture. And Meghan wanted in. She wanted validation, recognition, and the subtle endorsement that only Anna Wintour could provide. The tension was immediate. As Meghan moved closer to the front row, the cameras seemed to focus not just on her outfit, but on her trajectory. Every step she took was a calculated advance, a silent negotiation of space, power, and influence. The crowd sensed it. Fashion editors exchanged knowing glances. Models paused mid-pose, instinctively aware that something monumental was about to occur. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation, as if Paris itself were holding its breath. Anna Wintour sat at her usual spot, sunglasses reflecting the chaos of the room, expression unreadable as ever. To anyone else, she might have seemed aloof, detached, even cold. But in that moment, she was the fulcrum on which the entire show pivoted. Her eyes, hidden behind dark lenses, followed Meghan's every move. And Meghan, conscious of this gaze, adjusted her posture, lifted her chin, and moved with the poise of someone who believed she deserved acknowledgement from the most feared woman in fashion. The whispers began almost immediately. Not the kind of whispers you'd hear from fans or casual onlookers, but the subtle, knowing murmurs of those who understood the stakes. "She's trying too hard," one editor muttered. "Watch her reach for that hug," another whispered. The crowd seemed to fracture into factions, some rooting for Meghan's success, some skeptical of her motives. Everyone knew the rules of engagement in the fashion world. Power is displayed subtly, not demanded overtly. And Meghan, for all her skill, was about to test those rules in front of a global audience. She approached. Just a few steps away from Anna Wintour, Meghan extended her arms slightly, a tentative but earnest attempt at connection. Her smile was warm, inviting, calculated to disarm. This was more than a greeting, it was a plea, a subtle, almost imperceptible bid for acknowledgement. To the casual observer, it may have looked like a polite approach, but those who understood the dynamics knew it was something more daring, almost audacious. She was asking, begging even, for a gesture of acceptance from one of the most notoriously selective figures in the fashion industry. Anna paused. Not a flicker of recognition crossed her face. Her posture remained rigid, unyielding, almost statuesque. The room seemed to shrink in that pause, as if time itself had stalled. Meghan's heart may have skipped a beat, or perhaps it raced in anticipation of the approval she hoped was coming. She leaned in slightly, subtle, polite, yet undeniable in its intent. The world watched. Flashbulbs exploded, capturing the moment from every conceivable angle. Then came the words. The ones that would ricochet across social media, dominate headlines, and define the encounter for months to come. The words were simple, brutal, and utterly unforgettable. Fuck off. In that instant, every camera, every whisper, every expectation crystallized into a moment of public humiliation for Meghan. Gasps rippled through the front row. Models froze mid-stride. Editors jotted furiously, trying to record what had just happened in real time. The Duchess of Sussex, for all her composure, could not erase the sting of rejection that pierced the carefully curated armor she wore. For the audience watching on screens around the world, it seemed impossible. How could the Duchess, polished, poised, and media-savvy, be dismissed so sharply in one fleeting exchange? And yet, it had happened. The Queen of Fashion had spoken, and the statement was absolute. Meghan's expression flickered, a micro-expression captured by the sharpest lenses, a momentary display of shock, disbelief, and maybe even indignation. But Paris Fashion Week waits for no one. The models continued their strut down the runway. Designers smiled, photographers clicked, and the world moved on. Yet the echo of that exchange lingered like an electric current. Social media erupted within minutes. Tweets, Instagram posts, TikTok clips, and YouTube commentary dissected the moment endlessly. Analysts speculated about Meghan's intentions, her future in fashion circles, and the implications of such a brazen dismissal. Every outlet had a take, and every take seemed to deepen the narrative. The Duchess of Sussex versus the imperious Anna Wintour. And yet, despite the sting, despite the public humiliation, Meghan's story was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. What the cameras didn't capture, what the gossip columns could barely hint at, was the private aftermath, the whispered conversations backstage, the subtle power plays among fashion editors, and the strategies already being deployed to respond to this unprecedented clash. In Paris, nothing is ever simply what it seems. Every gesture, every look, every word carries weight. And in this game, Meghan had just learned, the rules were harsher than she imagined. But she was no stranger to scrutiny. She had navigated media storms, royal intrigues, and public controversies before. And now, in the glittering chaos of Paris Fashion Week, she faced one of her most public rejections yet. The question lingering in the air, heavy as the scent of Chanel and Balenciaga fabrics, was this: would Meghan retreat, recalibrate, or strike back in ways the world could not yet foresee? The stage was set, the players were in motion, and every eye was watching. And just as the show reached its crescendo, the moment that would become one of the most talked-about events of the season unfolded. A subtle glance, a whispered word, and a reaction that no one expected, a moment that, for those in the room, would be impossible to forget. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Paris had always been a city of spectacle, but during Fashion Week, it became something almost mythical. The streets pulsed with energy, a chaotic symphony of luxury cars, flashing cameras, and impeccably dressed attendees who seemed to glide rather than walk. The air smelled of Chanel No. 5, expensive perfume, and freshly pressed couture. It was here, amid this electric chaos, that the Balenciaga Womenswear Spring-Summer 2026 show was set to unfold, a stage that would witness both triumph and scandal in ways no one could predict. The venue itself was a marvel. A sleek, modernist building with floor-to-ceiling glass panels allowed the Parisian skyline to serve as a backdrop, blending old-world charm with contemporary glamour. Inside, the stage was set, The runway stretched like a ribbon of polished marble, illuminated by strategically placed lights that caught every shimmer of fabric, every flash of a high-heeled step. The front row, a veritable kingdom of fashion royalty, was packed with editors, designers, celebrities, and influencers whose approval could make or break careers. Among them, seated in her usual imperious posture, was Anna Wintour. The atmosphere was intoxicating, a heady mix of anticipation and competition. Photographers jockeyed for position, their lenses trained on the arrivals. Models rehearsed their walks, faces set in the practiced neutrality of industry perfection, bodies tense and poised. Every moment was a rehearsal, every glance a potential headline. And in the midst of it all, the crowd sensed something different that day. A subtle ripple of tension threaded through the audience, as though Paris itself was aware that the ordinary rules of fashion were about to be tested. Then she arrived. The Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, stepping out of a sleek black limousine with the confidence of someone who believed the world was theirs to command. Cameras exploded in response, their shutters clicking in rapid succession, capturing every detail of her striking all-white ensemble. The flowing cape trailed behind her like a silent herald, her wide-legged trousers swaying with each deliberate step, black satin heels clicking against the cobblestones with a sound that was both assertive and elegant. Even from a distance, it was clear that Meghan had chosen her appearance not simply for beauty, but for impact. Every fold of fabric, every curve of her silhouette, seemed calculated to convey power, poise, and a subtle claim to authority within a world that could be notoriously unforgiving. The crowd reacted instantly. Fans craned their necks, whispering her name with a mixture of admiration and judgment. Paparazzi shouted, their cameras held high like weapons aimed at a moving target. Reporters scribbled furiously, desperately trying to capture her demeanor, every tiny twitch of her face, every flicker of her eyes, and translated into words for a world that thrived on instant judgment. But Meghan, practiced and poised, maintained a serene exterior. She was acutely aware of the spectacle she created and seemed to revel in it, moving with a deliberate grace that demanded attention without appearing to seek it. For Meghan, this moment was more than a public appearance. It was an audition for relevance, power, and influence. She was navigating not just the cameras, but the invisible currents of the fashion world, a world where perception could eclipse reality, where a single misstep could reverberate for years. And in this crucible, her target was unmistakable, Anna Wintour. Anna's reputation preceded her like an aura of cold steel. She was both feared and revered, an arbiter of taste whose approval could catapult designers into immortality or consign them to obscurity. Her sunglasses, perpetually shielding her eyes, had seen the rise and fall of countless careers. Her expression, often inscrutable, carried the weight of decades spent mastering the art of judgment, of knowing instinctively when to bless and when to withhold. In Meghan's eyes, Anna represented the ultimate validation, a nod from the queen of fashion that could silence critics, bolster credibility, and solidify status in a world that measured influence in seconds and headlines. As Meghan approached the front row, the tension became palpable. Each step she took seemed measured, deliberate. The crowd sensed the drama unfolding even before words were spoken. Editors exchanged knowing glances, models paused mid-pose, and photographers adjusted their lenses, aware that something extraordinary was about to occur. Every eye was trained on Meghan, and every mind was racing to interpret her intentions. The whispers began. Not the idle chatter of casual observers, but the subtle hum of insiders who understood the stakes. "She's going for the hug," one editor muttered under her breath. "Watch her. She's trying to charm the uncharmable," another replied. The murmurs spread like wildfire, weaving through the audience, creating a palpable undercurrent of expectation. Everyone recognized the gravity of the encounter about to take place. The tension was almost unbearable, a tightrope strung between hope and humiliation. Meghan's movements were deliberate, almost strategic. She extended a subtle hand in Anna's direction, a gesture that combined both politeness and ambition. Her smile was carefully calibrated, warm enough to convey friendliness, confident enough to suggest that she deserved recognition. She leaned slightly, a silent request for connection, for acknowledgement from someone whose opinion could shift the trajectory of her public perception. Anna's reaction was slow, measured, and, to those watching, utterly impervious. The pause was pregnant with significance. Time seemed to stretch and warp. Every photographer held their breath. Every editor leaned forward, sensing the climax of a moment that would ripple far beyond the walls of the venue. Meghan's expression flickered subtly, a microcosm of hope, anxiety, and determination. She had faced scrutiny before, navigated complex media storms, and weathered public controversies, but this was different. This was a challenge that demanded not just grace, but resilience under the unforgiving gaze of fashion's most powerful figure. And then it happened. The words, sharp and brutal, cut through the charged atmosphere like a blade. "Fuck off." The room froze. Gasps rippled through the front row. Models halted mid-stride. Cameras captured the moment from every conceivable angle, and editors scribbled furiously to immortalize what had just transpired. Meghan's composure, so meticulously maintained, cracked for a fraction of a second. A fleeting expression of disbelief, shock, and perhaps even indignation. The world watched as the Duchess of Sussex, accustomed to admiration and validation, faced one of the most public rejections of her career. Yet, the show did not stop. Paris waits for no one, and Fashion Week is a machine that moves relentlessly forward. Models continued their strut down the runway. Designers smiled, photographers clicked, and the spectacle rolled on. But the echo of that exchange lingered, a ripple that extended beyond the confines of the venue, through social media, gossip columns, and late-night commentary shows. Within minutes, clips of the interaction went viral. Analysts debated Meghan's intentions, her public image, and the implications of such a brazen dismissal. Every outlet had a take, and every take added another layer to the growing narrative. The clash of royal poise and fashion authority, a collision that no one anticipated but everyone would discuss. And yet, the story was far from over. What the cameras did not capture, the private aftermath, the whispered conversations backstage, the strategies being formulated to address the incident, held secrets that would fuel speculation for weeks. Paris, with all its beauty and glamour, had become a battleground, and Meghan had stepped into it willingly, aware of both the risks and the potential rewards. The question hung in the air, charged with tension: how would Meghan respond? Would she retreat into caution, recalibrate her approach, or strike back with calculated precision in ways the world could not yet anticipate? In Paris, every gesture carries meaning, every glance speaks volumes, and every decision shapes destiny. And for the Duchess of Sussex, the stage had been set for a drama that extended far beyond the runway. But just as the show seemed to return to normal, a subtle shift occurred. Anna Wintour's eyes, sharp and assessing, did not leave Meghan. Somewhere in the throng of editors, designers, and paparazzi, whispers of the next move began to stir. And the moment that would define the remainder of Paris Fashion Week, the secret exchange, the hushed conversations, and the strategies that would unfold behind closed doors, was only beginning to reveal itself. What happened next would change the course of Meghan's presence in Paris forever, and those who thought they had seen it all had no idea what was coming. To understand the gravity of what happened that day in Paris, you must first understand Anna Wintour. She is more than an editor, more than a cultural icon. She is an institution. Her presence alone can redefine careers, crush egos, and set trends that reverberate across continents. Some call her intimidating, others call her visionary, but everyone agrees on one thing: Anna Wintour is untouchable. And in the fashion world, untouchable is both a blessing and a weapon. Anna's reputation precedes her. The signature bob haircut, perfectly coiffed and immovable, frames a face often hidden behind dark, reflective sunglasses. Those eyes, always observing, always calculating, have seen the rise and fall of countless celebrities and designers. A flick of her hand, a tilt of her head, or even a single raised eyebrow can make headlines before a model has finished her walk down the runway. She has built her empire on precision, discipline, and the ability to wield influence with quiet, unrelenting power. Legends of her past encounters circulate like whispered folklore among fashion insiders. There was the designer whose debut collection was derailed with a single critique in Vogue. There was the actor who tried to charm her during a gala and was met with a stare so cold it became the talk of the town for weeks. Even royalty, accustomed to privilege and deference, has occasionally found Anna's scrutiny unnerving. To approach her is to step into the eye of a storm, knowing that the slightest misstep can have consequences far beyond the room in which it occurs. And that is exactly what Meghan Markle faced. Anna's role in the fashion ecosystem is multifaceted. She is tastemaker, gatekeeper, critic, and, for the ambitious, a symbol of validation that is nearly impossible to earn. Her approval can elevate a designer from relative obscurity to global renown. Her disapproval can do the opposite, and it is often delivered with such subtlety that the world may not even realize it until months or years later. Meghan, who had navigated the glare of media scrutiny and royal expectations, was now testing herself against an entirely different kind of authority, one built not on titles, lineage, or public approval, but on decades of cultural dominance and discerning taste. Anna's attendance at Paris Fashion Week is never casual. She does not stroll into a venue merely to observe. Her presence signifies intention, judgment, and a careful curation of attention. Every front row seat is strategically filled. Every camera angle is considered. Every interaction, or lack thereof, sends a message. To those who work in fashion, being acknowledged by Anna Wintour is akin to receiving a nod from the gods. Being dismissed is a trial by fire, a lesson in humility, and a headline in itself. The Duchess of Sussex, stepping toward Anna that afternoon, was acutely aware of the stakes. Unlike Meghan's previous encounters with media or even the royal family, this was a world where power is exercised in silence, where gestures speak louder than words, and where reputation is currency more valuable than gold. And yet, Meghan advanced with a mixture of determination and hope, perhaps believing that her fame, poise, and cultivated image could influence the untouchable editor. Anna, as always, remained a study in composure. Seated in the front row, sunglasses shielding her eyes from the relentless flashes, she appeared both serene and imperious. Her hands rested on her lap, posture impeccable, as if she were carved from marble. Those who observed her closely could detect the subtlest shifts. The narrowing of an eyelid, the faint tilt of a head, that signaled awareness and assessment. Nothing escapes Anna Wintour. Nothing. She was already analyzing Meghan, her posture, her confidence, the cadence of her steps, the underlying motivations of every gesture. This was not the first time a royal figure or celebrity attempted to charm her. Over the years, Anna had endured countless approaches, from polite greetings to audacious attempts at flattery. Some succeeded, few. Most failed, fading into the background as she maintained her carefully constructed persona. Her reputation is built on this consistency, a refusal to be swayed by popularity, titles, or celebrity. For Anna, respect must be earned, and it must be earned on her terms, within the world she dominates. Yet, Meghan's approach was different. There was audacity in it, a quiet insistence that she, too, deserved recognition. It was an ambitious move, the kind that could either impress or backfire spectacularly. Fashion insiders watching that afternoon whispered to each other, recognizing the boldness. The Duchess was not just attending. She was seeking validation from a figure who gives none freely. And that pursuit, by its very nature, carries enormous risk. Anna's history of blunt dismissals is well documented. There are stories of designers trembling before meetings, of editors pivoting strategies after a single comment, of celebrities leaving events with bruised egos. Her judgments are precise, measured, and often devastating in their subtlety. To be told, even indirectly, that one has failed in her eyes is to face a verdict that resonates far beyond the walls of any fashion venue. Meghan, stepping into this vortex, was essentially challenging a cultural institution, a woman whose influence transcends trends, titles, and even royalty. The tension was amplified by the contrast between the two women. Meghan, radiant in white, representing both ambition and aspiration, and Anna, seated, composed, embodying authority and discipline. Every inch of body language spoke volumes. Meghan leaned in slightly, an invitation for recognition, while Anna remained still, almost statuesque, her sunglasses reflecting the chaos around her but not revealing her judgment. The energy between them was palpable, a silent conversation that required no words, yet carried the weight of decades of power dynamics, societal expectation, and personal ambition. It is important to note that Anna Wintour's power is not derived solely from her reputation. It is reinforced by experience, intellect, and strategic acumen. She has cultivated a network of influence that spans the globe, understands trends before they surface, and has the uncanny ability to predict how any action will reverberate through culture, media, and commerce. Meghan was not just seeking a hug. She was navigating a labyrinth of influence, where a single misstep could lead to both public and private consequences. The audience felt it, too. Those seated around Anna shifted in their chairs, sensing the undercurrent of tension. Editors exchanged brief, knowing glances. Models paused mid-walk, cameras poised. The entire room seemed to vibrate with the anticipation of what was about to occur. This was not a casual greeting between two public figures. This was a collision of worlds. Royal expectation versus fashion authority, ambition versus experience, visibility versus control. And then the moment crystallized. Meghan extended her arms subtly, a gesture that was at once polite, hopeful, and insistent. She smiled, her expression carefully balanced to convey warmth without vulnerability, confidence without arrogance. It was an offer, a plea, a test. Anna, as always, remained still, observing, calculating, weighing every nuance. The air thickened with tension. Photographers captured the moment from every angle, knowing that this interaction would define headlines, memes, and social commentary for weeks to come. And then the words came. Sharp, blunt, unforgettable. Fuck off. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the front row. Models froze. Photographers clicked furiously. Editors scribbled notes, as if the moment were a lesson in audacity and consequence. Meghan's composure flickered, a micro-expression betraying shock, disbelief, and perhaps a fleeting sting of indignation. For those watching, it was a study in power and the raw impact of rejection. For Meghan, it was a public reminder that status, fame, and poise do not always grant immunity from the judgment of those who wield real influence. Even as the runway continued, the repercussions were immediate. Social media erupted with clips of the exchange. Experts debated the implications, and headlines proliferated. Analysts speculated on Meghan's intentions, her strategy, and her future standing in the complex intersection of royalty and celebrity culture. Every lens, every eye, every keyboard in the world seemed to focus on the unyielding figure of Anna Wintour and the Duchess who dared to approach her. Yet the story was far from over. Anna's judgment was only part of the equation. Behind the scenes, backstage whispers, strategic consultations, and subtle power plays were already unfolding. Paris Fashion Week, for all its beauty, is a battlefield, and Meghan had stepped willingly into the fray. The question lingered. How would she navigate the aftermath, both publicly and privately? What would happen next? How Meghan would respond, whether she would retreat, recalibrate, or find an unexpected avenue to assert her presence, remained unknown. But one thing was certain. The world had just witnessed a moment that would define her Paris Fashion Week experience forever, a moment that would echo across fashion circles, royal commentary, and social media for months to come. And somewhere in the room, Anna Wintour watched, silent and unyielding, already anticipating the ripples this encounter would create in ways no one could yet predict. The storm had begun, and the stage was set. The moment Meghan Markle laid eyes on Anna Wintour, something shifted in the air. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to the casual observer, but for those who understood the currents of power in fashion, it was electric. Meghan had prepared for this encounter in ways most people could not imagine. Hours, days, maybe even weeks of strategizing had gone into every detail. The outfit, the posture, the timing, the approach. Yet as she moved closer, reality pressed in with the subtle brutality that only Paris Fashion Week could deliver. Her steps were deliberate, measured to the smallest fraction of an inch. Each click of her black satin Balenciaga heels against the polished stone echoed like a drumbeat, announcing her approach. Photographers snapped, capturing every moment, but Meghan's attention was singular. She was focused entirely on the woman seated before her. Anna Wintour, the queen of fashion, untouchable, unflinching, and, at least in Meghan's mind, the final arbiter of success in this world. Backstage, the whispers had intensified. Models paused mid-stride, stylists exchanged nervous glances, editors leaned forward in their seats. Everyone sensed that something unprecedented was about to happen. For a duchess accustomed to command, influence, and attention, this was a new kind of challenge. Here, charisma and poise were not enough. Here, validation had to be earned in the eyes of a woman who had witnessed decades of triumph, scandal, and ambition, and who measured every gesture with the precision of a scalpel. Meghan's approach was a calculated mixture of humility and confidence. She extended a subtle hand, a gentle invitation, while simultaneously projecting an aura of assurance. It was a paradoxical dance. She needed to appear respectful without appearing weak, hopeful without appearing desperate. Every micro-expression, every tilt of her head, every curve of her smile was a note in a symphony of strategic calculation. She was asking, begging even, for acknowledgement from a figure who rarely offered it freely. The room seemed to hold its breath. Flashbulbs exploded, capturing the moment from every conceivable angle, freezing it in pixels, photographs, and eventually, viral clips. Those present sensed the tension, the unspoken power struggle unfolding before their eyes. Editors whispered in quiet tones, speculating on the outcome. Models froze mid-stride, as if instinctively aware that history was being made in the briefest exchange between two women whose worlds rarely intersected so directly. And then came the internal calculus, the rapid-fire thoughts racing through Meghan's mind. She reminded herself of her accomplishments, of her poise, of the millions of eyes that followed her every move. She told herself she deserved recognition, that her presence at this show was not merely as a spectator, but as a participant in the cultural dialogue of fashion and influence. Yet beneath the layers of preparation, there was a flicker of doubt. This was Anna Wintour, a woman whose silence could cut deeper than words. Could Meghan truly command attention here, or would her approach be misinterpreted as overreach, arrogance, or desperation? Despite the tension, Meghan advanced. Her movements were graceful, a dance of calculated intent. She leaned in slightly, a gesture designed to convey openness, friendliness, and respect. Her eyes sought connection, a subtle request for acknowledgement, while her smile was carefully calibrated to project warmth without vulnerability. It was a delicate balance, a high-wire act of social navigation, and every observer in the front row felt the magnitude of the moment. Anna's response was slow, deliberate, and unreadable. The slight shift of her head, the faint set of her lips, the almost imperceptible narrowing of her eyes behind dark lenses. These were signals, tiny and cryptic, that carried immense weight. To anyone else, it might have seemed like a casual pause. To those who understood, it was a statement. Anna was assessing, measuring, judging. Meghan had entered a domain where every gesture is scrutinized, and Anna Wintour was the ultimate arbiter. The whispers intensified. "She's going for it," one editor murmured. "The Duchess is trying to engage her," another added, eyes wide with anticipation. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone knew that Anna Wintour does not hand out approval lightly. Her silence was formidable, her judgment precise. And now, Meghan was in the spotlight of that judgment, her every move magnified and interpreted by dozens of eyes and thousands more through the lens of social media. Meghan reached the point of proximity. Her hand extended slightly, her posture open, yet controlled. Every fiber of her being conveyed hope, anticipation, and ambition. She wanted this interaction to be perfect, to be memorable, to be the validation she sought. The crowd watched. The cameras clicked. The whispers swelled. It was a moment suspended in time, charged with potential and peril. In the milliseconds that followed, Meghan made her move. Leaning slightly forward, she attempted to bridge the gap, not just physically, but symbolically. She was reaching for connection, acknowledgement, and perhaps, in some deep, human way, reassurance. Her heart likely pounded with the anticipation of a response that could either validate her approach or shatter her composure. She had prepared for every possible scenario, except perhaps for the one that would unfold. And then it happened. Anna Wintour's voice, measured, blunt, and devastatingly precise, cut through the ambient noise of cameras, whispers, and Parisian hustle. The words were simple, direct, and unforgettable. "Fuck off." The impact was immediate. A collective gasp spread through the front row. Photographers froze, capturing every angle of Meghan's reaction. Editors scribbled furiously, trying to immortalize what had just occurred. For Meghan, it was a public rebuke of unprecedented scale, a reminder that no amount of preparation, status, or fame can guarantee approval in a domain governed by unyielding authority. Yet the drama did not end there. Meghan's mind, a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, had to process the sting, the shock, and the implications of this moment. For those watching, it was a study in power, rejection, and resilience. For Meghan, it was a lesson in humility and the limits of influence, even for a duchess accustomed to commanding attention. Backstage, the whispers escalated. Stylists, editors, and models debated the significance of the encounter, dissecting every gesture and facial expression. Social media erupted within minutes, spreading the footage across platforms, where commentators and fans dissected it endlessly. Analysts speculated on Meghan's strategy, her intentions, and the ramifications of such a bold move. The world was watching, and every opinion added fuel to the fire. Amidst the chaos, Meghan had a choice: retreat, recalibrate, or find a way to assert herself despite the rebuke. The stage was set for the next act, one that would reveal not only her character, but also the intricate power dynamics of fashion, celebrity, and royalty colliding in real time. In Paris, nothing remains hidden for long. Every gesture, glance, and expression carries meaning, amplified by the lenses of cameras and the scrutiny of millions online. Meghan's desperate move had drawn attention, yes, but it had also revealed vulnerability. A crack in the armor she so carefully constructed. How she would respond, privately and publicly, would determine the narrative that followed, shaping perceptions for weeks, months, and possibly years. And as Meghan stood there, momentarily stunned, the whispers began to shift. Some were sympathetic, some critical, some speculative. Behind the scenes, strategic minds were already at work, considering how to navigate the fallout of this encounter. Every participant, from editors to designers, sensed that what had just happened was more than a fleeting moment. It was the beginning of a saga that would dominate Paris Fashion Week and beyond. The question lingering in the air was electric. What would Meghan do next? Would she retreat into caution, strike back with calculated precision, or seize a new, unexpected opportunity to reclaim control? The tension between ambition and humiliation, hope and rejection, was palpable. Every eye in the room, every lens focused, every whisper circulating, seemed to converge on that single, suspended moment. And somewhere, behind the perfectly poised exterior of Anna Wintour, a quiet calculation was unfolding. This encounter was far from over. The ripples were only beginning, and the storm that would define Meghan's Paris Fashion Week experience had just begun to gather force. What came next would determine not only Meghan's fate in the fashion world, but also the broader narrative of ambition, celebrity, and power colliding in one of the most high-stakes arenas on the planet. A hug, such a simple, universal gesture. A brief embrace can convey warmth, connection, empathy. Yet in Paris, during the Balenciaga Women's Wear Spring-Summer 2026 show, a hug became the epicenter of tension, a crucible of ambition and ego, and the defining moment of the Duchess of Sussex's appearance. For Meghan Markle, the gesture was not just physical, it was symbolic. It represented validation, acknowledgement, the kind of recognition that could momentarily quiet critics, bridge worlds, and grant access to a realm she had long admired but never fully commanded. She approached with a calculated grace, every step measured, every glance precise. Her eyes, trained by years of navigating public scrutiny, were locked on Anna Wintour. The editor-in-chief's sunglasses reflected the scene, opaque and impenetrable. To the casual observer, Anna might have appeared serene, composed, untouchable. But Meghan, like a chess player calculating her moves against a master, saw the hidden currents, the subtle tilt of Anna's head, the tension in her shoulders, the weight of decades spent wielding authority in silence. Meghan's extended arms were both literal and figurative. She leaned in slightly, her body language saying, "I seek connection, recognition, approval." Her smile was warm but controlled, hopeful yet contained. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, anticipating every reaction, every possible scenario. Yet, for all her preparation, nothing could truly ready her for the response she was about to receive. The room seemed to hold its breath. Editors, designers, and models sensed the gravity of the moment. Cameras clicked in rapid succession, capturing every nuance, every flicker of expression. Flashbulbs illuminated Meghan's all-white ensemble, the flowing cape, the crisp shirt, the tailored trousers, and reflected off Anna's perfectly poised frame. The tension was almost tangible, a thick current that connected the two women in a silent, high-stakes negotiation. And then it happened. Anna Wintour, the queen of fashion, leaned back slightly, her hands remaining perfectly still in her lap, and delivered a response that would ripple across the industry, the media, and social consciousness. Fuck off. It was as simple as it was devastating. The words, so blunt, so precise, carried the weight of decades of authority, judgment, and power. They cut through the ambient noise, the clatter of cameras, the murmurs of onlookers, and landed squarely on Meghan. The Duchess's expression flickered, a micro-expression of shock, disbelief, and perhaps even hurt. For someone who had navigated media storms, royal protocols, and relentless public scrutiny, this was a rejection of an entirely different magnitude. It was personal, public, and profoundly humiliating. The immediate reaction was chaotic yet measured in its own way. Gasps rippled through the front row. Photographers snapped furiously, capturing every second for the world to dissect later. Editors leaned forward, pencils and notebooks at the ready, recognizing that they were witnessing a historic moment. Models froze mid-step, aware that the world's gaze was not on their walk, but on the clash of ambition, reputation, and ego unfolding before them. For Meghan, the hug that never happened was a moment suspended in time. It was more than a simple embrace. It was a barometer of influence, a test of her ability to navigate a world where status and recognition are earned through subtlety and patience. She had approached Anna not as a celebrity seeking attention, but as a figure seeking acknowledgement from one of the most powerful women in fashion history. And yet, despite every ounce of preparation, the response was unequivocal, dismissive, and shocking. Social media exploded within moments. Clips of the encounter went viral, shared thousands of times across platforms, dissected by commentators, analysts, and fans alike. The world debated Meghan's intentions. Was she desperate for approval? Overconfident? Audacious? And Anna's response, brief, sharp, unforgettable, became the centerpiece of a global conversation about power, celebrity, and ambition. Memes proliferated, Twitter threads ran for pages, and fashion blogs dissected every angle, every expression, every second of footage. The hug that never happened had become a symbol, a cultural flashpoint that transcended the immediate context of Paris Fashion Week. Backstage, the atmosphere was no less charged. Stylists, PR consultants, and insiders whispered feverishly. The analysis was rapid fire. How would Meghan recover? What did Anna's refusal mean for her standing in the fashion world? Could this moment redefine public perception of the Duchess, not just in Europe but globally? Every observer recognized the magnitude of the incident and understood that its repercussions would ripple far beyond the confines of the show. And yet, despite the public rebuke, Meghan's strategy remained in play. In her mind, the exchange was not a defeat but a challenge, a high-stakes test of resilience, adaptability, and poise. She had faced criticism before, navigated intense scrutiny, and emerged stronger. The question now was how she would maneuver through this new terrain, where social perception, professional recognition, and personal ambition intersected in ways both subtle and explosive. The contrast between the two women could not have been more stark. Meghan, radiant, ambitious, seeking validation and connection. Anna, composed, untouchable, a master of influence wielded with precision. Every gesture, every micro-expression, every blink communicated volumes. To the untrained eye, it might have seemed like a simple interaction. To those who understood, it was a masterclass in power dynamics, a real-time lesson in the collision of celebrity and authority. Yet the impact of the hug that never happened extended beyond the immediate participants. The audience, both in the venue and across the globe, became part of the unfolding drama. Social media amplified every nuance, turning a single moment into a phenomenon. Commentators debated motives, intentions, and the broader implications for Meghan's public image. Fashion insiders speculated on Anna's reasoning, dissecting her decision with clinical precision. And all the while, Meghan remained in the eye of a storm that was only beginning to gather momentum. The emotional stakes were palpable. For Meghan, this was more than a public slight. It was a test of her identity, her ambition, and her ability to assert herself in a world that does not easily yield to outsiders, even those with titles, fame, or media savvy. For Anna, it was a reaffirmation of authority, a subtle demonstration of control, and a reminder that in the world of fashion, power is exercised through silence as much as through words. And as the audience absorbed the moment, the whispers and speculation began to evolve. Some expressed sympathy for Meghan, recognizing her vulnerability and ambition. Others celebrated Anna's decisive clarity, interpreting it as a masterstroke of influence and composure. The narrative was fluid, constantly shifting as new perspectives emerged. Social media amplified interpretations, and the story traveled beyond the walls of the venue into living rooms, cafes, and offices around the world. Yet, even with all the analysis, all the speculation, and all the commentary, one thing remained certain. The hug that never happened was a defining moment. It encapsulated the collision of ambition and authority, the subtle art of influence, and the high stakes of public perception in both fashion and celebrity culture. And for Meghan Markle, it was a reminder that even in a world where she had achieved unprecedented visibility, approval from certain figures remains fiercely guarded, difficult to earn, and, at times, devastatingly withheld. Backstage, the real story continued to unfold. Whispers grew into conversations, strategies were discussed in hushed tones, and the intricate dance of damage control began. Meghan's next moves would determine how the world perceived her resilience, her poise, and her ability to navigate both humiliation and ambition simultaneously. Every interaction, every glance, every choice from that point forward carried amplified weight. Paris Fashion Week, always a theater of spectacle, had produced a drama that extended far beyond the runway. The hug that never happened had become a symbol of power, rejection, and ambition, one that would echo through social media, fashion commentary, and celebrity culture for weeks to come. And as the day drew on, one truth remained. The encounter between Meghan Markle and Anna Wintour was far from over, and the ripples of this moment would shape the narrative of the Duchess's presence in Paris in ways that no one could yet foresee. But what happened after that, when the cameras stopped clicking and the whispers behind the scenes took over, would reveal layers of strategy, tension, and ambition that even the most seasoned observers could not have anticipated. The Balenciaga runway resumed its rhythm, the models gliding in their meticulously crafted ensembles, the designers watching from the wings with nervous anticipation. But the room still vibrated with the aftershock of the moment that had just unfolded, a moment so charged that even the polished professionalism of Paris Fashion Week could not mask its impact. Whispers spread like wildfire, a low murmur at first, then growing into a cascade of reactions that carried through the front row and beyond. Editors, seated with poised elegance, leaned toward one another, their voices hushed but intense. "Did you see that?" one asked, eyes wide, still adjusting to what had just happened. "She actually went for the hug, and Anna just shut her down." Another editor nodded, jotting notes in a leather-bound journal as if recording history itself. Every detail mattered. The angle of Meghan's lean, the precise words Anna had chosen, the brief flicker of surprise across the Duchess's face. In fashion, these micro-moments were dissected endlessly. They were the stuff of cultural lore. Models backstage paused mid-step, the rhythm of their rehearsed movements interrupted. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to disbelief, and some whispered among themselves, trying to piece together the dynamics that had played out before their eyes. It was a performance within a performance, a collision of ambition and authority that transcended the runway. For those who understood the stakes, the encounter was not just about a rejected hug. It was about the subtle, invisible currents of influence that define Paris Fashion Week and the broader world of celebrity. The murmurs extended beyond the venue itself. Social media accounts exploded within seconds. Clips of the encounter circulated across platforms, shared thousands of times in real time. Analysts, commentators, and casual observers alike weighed in, each adding their interpretation, their speculation, and their judgment. Memes began to appear almost immediately, some celebrating Meghan's audacity, others highlighting the bluntness of Anna's refusal. The public's fascination with power, celebrity, and etiquette merged into a viral storm, amplifying a single interaction into a global phenomenon. But within the venue, the whispers carried another layer of significance, the subtle messages being exchanged among insiders. Stylists, PR consultants, and editors leaned toward one another, their conversations measured yet urgent. "She's testing boundaries," one whispered, nodding toward Meghan. But Anna's response, "That's textbook control. She doesn't just reject, she teaches a lesson." Another stylist added, "Watch closely. This will define Meghan's reputation in fashion circles for months." Each comment reflected an acute awareness of the social and cultural mechanics at play. The room itself seemed to react. Cameras continued to flash, capturing every fabric fold, every glance, every microexpression. But the audience's focus had shifted subtly. It was no longer solely on the clothes, the designers, or the spectacle of the show. It was on the tension, the human drama unfolding before them. Meghan's body language had shifted slightly, a subtle blend of composure and restraint, attempting to recover from the unexpected rejection. Her posture remained elegant, her smile measured, yet the micro-expression of surprise lingered for those paying close attention. For many in the audience, the moment was unprecedented. Few had witnessed such a direct confrontation between celebrity and fashion royalty, especially involving a figure as high-profile as Meghan Markle. The whispers carried interpretations, rumors, and immediate analyses. "Do you think she miscalculated?" one editor asked. "Or was this a deliberate push for recognition?" Another voice offered a contrasting view. "It's a power play. Meghan's showing she can step into this world, even if she gets knocked down in the process." Backstage, the energy was equally intense, though more controlled. Stylists adjusted gowns, models practiced their expressions, and PR consultants prepared statements even before the final applause had faded. The incident was not just a personal rejection. It was now a narrative, a story to be managed, amplified, and contextualized. Every movement, every conversation, and every decision would contribute to how the world perceived Meghan's resilience, her ambition, and her ability to navigate the complex ecosystem of fashion and celebrity. The whispers grew louder as insiders debated the implications. "Do you think Anna anticipated this?" one asked, voice low but sharp. "Absolutely," another replied. "She's seen countless attempts like this. The rejection wasn't personal, it was strategic. A lesson in humility for someone entering this arena." Others offered a more sympathetic perspective. "Meghan's move was bold, but she misjudged the dynamics. It's not about talent or poise. It's about earning trust and recognition in a world that doesn't hand it out lightly." As the murmurs continued, the audience's attention extended beyond the immediate interaction. Flashbulbs captured Meghan's subtle reactions, a slight tightening of her jaw, a measured inhale, the briefest flicker of disappointment before composure returned. Each movement was analyzed, theorized, and discussed. For those watching, both in the venue and online, this was not just an incident. It was a lesson in power, influence, and the delicate art of social navigation in a high-stakes environment. Yet amidst the whispers and gasps, Meghan's internal calculations were even more intricate. She had faced scrutiny before, navigated complex media storms, and managed public perception with skill. But this rejection was immediate, personal, and performed in the spotlight of one of the world's most influential fashion events. She had to consider her next moves carefully, how to maintain poise, recover dignity, and assert herself in a narrative that now included one of the most formidable figures in fashion history. The whispers were accompanied by an undercurrent of speculation. Who would come to Meghan's defense? Would any allies intervene? Could this rejection redefine her reputation in the fashion world? Social media amplified the questions instantaneously, with viral clips sparking debates, opinion threads, and commentary across platforms. Celebrities, influencers, and ordinary viewers alike dissected every detail, from the angle of Meghan's lean to Anna's unwavering composure. Amidst all this, Meghan remained aware that she was being watched on multiple fronts. Cameras, attendees, and social media all scrutinized her response. A single misstep could become a headline. A subtle recovery could be interpreted as grace or resilience. Every movement mattered. In Paris, the smallest gestures carry the weight of interpretation, and Meghan understood that her response in the next few minutes could either mitigate the impact of the rejection or amplify it indefinitely. The room's energy shifted again as Anna maintained her composure, seemingly unfazed by the ripple effect of her words. Her posture, her silence, her subtle gaze conveyed authority without needing elaboration. Those familiar with her methods recognized this as a deliberate act, a demonstration of control. For Meghan, the challenge was immediate. How to maintain elegance, assert agency, and navigate the aftermath in real time. Editors continued to murmur, stylists whispered, and models adjusted their pace. The show, ostensibly a display of Balenciaga's latest creations, had become a theater of power dynamics, ambition, and social strategy. Every observer understood that this moment was layered: public spectacle, personal confrontation, and a lesson in navigating the invisible hierarchies that govern both fashion and celebrity culture. And while the gasps and whispers circulated, Meghan's internal dialogue likely raced. How to regain momentum. How to assert presence without overstepping boundaries. How to ensure that this moment would not define her entirely, yet could be leveraged as a display of resilience and sophistication. The calculations were relentless, informed by years of experience, media training, and personal ambition. Every step forward, every subtle gesture, would be analyzed, interpreted, and judged. The whispers and gasps did more than capture immediate reactions. They set the stage for ongoing intrigue. Backstage, journalists scrambled to confirm details, social media influencers speculated endlessly, and PR teams worked to frame the narrative in real time. Every second was an opportunity to shape perception, and Meghan's response would be central to how the incident was remembered. And somewhere in the audience, behind the unflinching sunglasses, Anna Wintour observed silently. She understood the currents she had unleashed, the ripples of attention and speculation that would follow, and the subtle psychological impact of her words on the ambitious Duchess. Her mastery of timing, restraint, and authority was absolute, and for those watching, it became a lesson in the raw power of reputation and influence. Yet even as the whispers swirled and the gasps echoed, one question loomed larger than all others. How would Meghan respond once the cameras were no longer snapping? The flashbulbs had faded, and the backstage conversations began in earnest. The stage was set, the players in motion, and the narrative was only beginning to unfold. The gasps, the murmurs, the speculation, they were just the beginning. Behind closed doors, where the true machinations of fashion and celebrity collide, the consequences of that brief, electric moment would continue to reverberate. And what came next, the private calculations, strategic moves, and subtle power plays, would reveal the next chapter in a story the world was only beginning to witness. As the flashbulbs dimmed and the roar of the crowd subsided, Meghan Markle retreated momentarily from the glaring spotlight of the front row, slipping into the more private corridors behind the Balenciaga runway. This backstage area, usually a hive of calm professionalism amid the chaos of Fashion Week, now felt like a crucible, a pressure cooker where every glance, every gesture, and every whisper carried weight. For Meghan, the rejection she had just endured wasn't just a public moment. It had landed like a stone in her chest, sending ripples of disbelief, hurt, and strategic recalibration throughout her mind. She paused in a narrow hallway lined with racks of couture garments, the scent of perfume, fabric, and hairspray hanging thick in the air. Meghan's breaths were measured, yet the rapid thrum of adrenaline coursing through her veins betrayed the tension she carried. The hug that had never happened, the blunt dismissal from Anna Wintour, and the collective gasp of the audience replayed in her mind with relentless clarity. This wasn't simply a fashion faux pas. It was an affront to her carefully constructed image, a challenge to her authority, and a stark reminder that in some arenas, even a duchess could be rendered vulnerable. Backstage, stylists and assistants moved with urgent efficiency, adjusting garments, ensuring the model's hair and makeup were flawless, and preparing for the next segment of the show. But Meghan's presence shifted the usual rhythm. Whispers traveled quickly among the crew. "Did you see that?" one stylist asked, her voice barely above a murmur. "Anna just shut her down." Another added, "That was brutal. Even for Paris Fashion Week, that's next level." The gossip was immediate, intense, and inescapable. Every movement Meghan made was being watched, analyzed, and interpreted, even in these supposed moments of privacy. The Duchess paused at a mirrored wall, her reflection reflecting not just her physical form, but the storm of emotions and calculations swirling within her. She had faced criticism before, endured intense media scrutiny, and navigated the high stakes of royal life under the unrelenting gaze of the press. Yet this was different. This was a collision with authority unmediated by protocol, hierarchy, or expectation. Anna Wintour's rejection was not just personal. It was emblematic of a world in which status alone could not guarantee approval. Meghan's mind raced through possibilities, analyzing the encounter from every conceivable angle. She considered her approach. Had she leaned in too eagerly, smiled too broadly, or misjudged the timing? Had her all-white ensemble conveyed confidence or desperation? Her thoughts were rapid fire, each calculation intertwined with emotion, disappointment, embarrassment, resolve, and determination. Every second backstage became a strategic moment, an opportunity to regain control, reassert composure, and prepare for the next public-facing encounter. And yet, despite the sting of the dismissal, Meghan was not passive. She had built her public persona on resilience, adaptability, and the ability to transform setbacks into narrative opportunities. The backstage area, lined with mirrors, couture racks, and the murmurs of fashion insiders, became a private stage for reflection and recalibration. Her posture, although elegant and poised, subtly shifted as she considered her next moves. How would she respond to the inevitable media coverage? How would she frame the narrative of this encounter, balancing dignity, ambition, and resilience? These were questions that demanded immediate answers.